Some people with much bigger channels than mine have talked negatively about Hoplomachus Victorum, and I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this. They're wrong. And I'm here to set the record straight. Hoplomachus Victorum has appeared on several of my top 5 lists without ever having a review. It's time to remedy that, but I couldn't resist mixing in Pandora's Ruin, which arrived earlier this year. I'm J. Allen Riker, horror author, and solo board game fanatic, and this is my review of Hoplomachus Victorum. I'm going to try to make sure to distinguish when I'm talking about the changes made by the expansion, because while, spoiler, Pandora's Ruin is a great expansion, it is by no means required. Not even close. With the exception of the Mercury's Boots rule set, which was officially introduced in this expansion, but which I've been playing with since the campaign, because Chip Theory made the rules available for free as a PDF. If you have Hoplomachus Victorum, download these rules. I think that they are the way to play, and I'm going to try to remember to put a link down in the description. The year is AD 79. Seers have learned of the imminent eruption of Mount Vesuvius, and those versed in the mystic arts have made invocations to stop the calamity from claiming thousands of lives. However, these actions have angered Pluto, god of the underworld, who vows to usher in even greater destruction unless Earth's strongest champions accomplish a series of tasks in a realm of grueling combat. The world of Hoplomachus Victorum is composed of 8 nations. You choose the greatest warrior of one of these nations to act as your avatar and go on a quest to defeat the other warriors, known as the Primuses, until you are powerful enough to face Pluto's champion, one of 8 scions, in a final battle. In effect, this looks like traveling to each nation, having either a deadly battle or a sporting event in some of the Colosseums there, increasing your stats, the quality of your dice, or gaining special abilities specific to your hero, and eventually moving into the nation's capital to face one of the other heroes you could have chosen, a Primus. Rinse and repeat until you face the Scion. What might people not like about Hoplomachus Victorum? Okay, so first, I think we need to address the issues I alluded to before. One's a channel massively bigger than mine raised, and which I think are almost completely wrong. I know this sounds hostile, but honestly, these bad takes prevented people who would really enjoy the game from playing it. I say that because it almost kept me from buying it, and as solo gamers, we really rely on accurate reviews, so I want to offer a different perspective. Keywords. In a game like Conflict of Heroes, the troops are almost the same, except their stats. You aren't getting wildly different effects from the majority of your troops, with a couple of exceptions like mortar units. That is not the case here. There is a huge variety of skills that have a big effect on combat, and thus should factor into your strategy in a major way. These skills keywords are all collected onto a player aid, and it's a full 2 sides worth. Looks overwhelming, right? The criticism that's been leveled at Hoplomachus Victorum is that it's too much to take in, too much to remember, too much variation on the base gameplay. The reason this is wrong for most of us, and take this from a person who has repeatedly confessed that he has trouble remembering to apply rules from different sources, is that only a few are introduced at a time. At the beginning of the campaign, the majority of both the troops you use and the troops you face off against have one of 4 keywords, because instead of being from a specific nation, these soldiers are neutral. I don't know where the country of Neutralia is. It doesn't appear on the map, but they have the blandest versions of the 4 types of soldiers in the game: attacker, archer, tactician, defender. Each have a certain keyword that then continues to appear on each iteration of that soldier type, regardless of the nation that they're from. Attackers have retaliate. They strike back when struck if they survive. Archers have first strike. Most soldiers are dazed as they stride into the arena from the dark barracks, dazzled one round by the brilliant sun and the searing blue sky. Archers also can't move upon deployment, but they can fire. Defenders taunt. These are your tanks with the highest ability to take damage. When adjacent to an enemy, taunt forces the enemy to attack them, allowing you to close in with your more fragile forces. You get the idea. This isn't overwhelming. As you move from nation to nation, you encounter new skills. But here's the key. Each nation's warriors only have a few defining traits. You only have to deal with a handful of new keywords, and then you have a few battles to fully acclimate yourself before you change nations and encounter more. Honestly, this is a brilliant way to handle giving the player a lot of combat variety, changing things in the campaign just when it might be getting stale, but without overwhelming the player by throwing everything at them out the gate. And I think that this is actually something the designers should be commended for rather than criticized for. I've often said that variety adds interest and replayability. Like, I can imagine, I've never played Hoplomachus Remastered. If it has anything like this amount of keywords, I can imagine having some amount of trouble if all of them are available at once. I don't know if that's the case, but I could definitely see it. I've often said that variety adds interest and replayability, but it does also add complexity. There are trade-offs for every design decision, but here, the manner in which it's mitigated makes it almost all pro in my experience, even as a forgetful person. But despite the great implementation, if you dislike situation-specific rules that are on components and don't apply all the time, that is still present. You see all the dice. You see that the health for soldiers is usually 2 or 3, and you see that very little of this is mitigable. Nope, brainless dice chucker, pass. Oh, even worse, this game is essentially deterministic up until the point you roll those dice. You meticulously plan out the interactions between the literal dozens of keywords, looking them up and comparing them, then you totally biff your roll. Table flip, never play again. Here's the thing. I am very sensitive to this. There are very popular games I've written off because of how they are designed to encourage lots of planning and then ruin your plans with output randomness. But there are ways to design around this. Final Girl isn't higher up my list because of this aspect, though it's not the worst offender, and I do think that it's very thematic. But I bring this up because remember, Final Girl is a re-implementation of Hostage Negotiator, and a lot of people found that they didn't love Hostage Negotiator and then did love it once they started playing the added career mode expansion. Sure, you lost the battle, but you go home and nurse your wounds and come back the next day to continue the war. The same thing is at play here. Yeah, if it comes right down to it and you end up losing to a bad dice roll, you rage, but you don't flip the table because you need to get to the next town to compete in that next battle because Pluto is still plotting. And while I hate losing, like I hate it, there's a huge difference between losing a 15 or 20 minute match and losing a 2-hour game. I lose Marvel Champions all the time. Same with Bullet, Heart, and Star. But I dust myself off, reset, and play again because it didn't take 2 hours to get to that point. In Hoplomachus Victorum, the battles take 15 or 20 minutes. And if you're losing, you can forfeit. That costs you. You don't fail forward in this game. But you live to fight another day, and hopefully you learned a lesson. Along with that type of mitigation, where the luck is just smoothed out over a 10 to 12 hour journey, there are also some smaller types. There's, of course, the traditional type where it influences your tactics. You have a couple of fighters bunched up, and it's your turn to attack. You get to choose the order they go in, and the fact that you aren't sure how much damage any will do adds a fun sequencing decision, and honestly, before that, a positioning decision. There's a particularly vicious opponent that you really want to wipe out, but there's a second opponent that you could take out if your rolls come up like as they statistically should. Your heavy hitter goes first to try to drop their heavy hitter in one go, but you've positioned your other soldier so that they can do the backup damage to that larger threat or to take out the other if your heavy hitter rolls well. That's a fun decision. It gives you a chance to feel clever. These sorts of choices pit your greedy self against your cautious self. Also, the moves don't take anywhere near a Gloomhaven amount of time to plan. I'm a slow thinker and I actually enjoy slow moving. And after I'm warmed up by the first couple of matches in a new campaign, it's flowing. You aren't having 10 minutes of planning undone by a bad roll. Also, and I admit this is something new that the first reviewers didn't have access to, Chip Theory addressed this complaint in their new rule set, Mercury's Boots. There's a type of card called an opportunity card. It's one of the only aspects that I do feel the loss of when playing with the new rule set. Before, you use these cards to add a little spice, little optional side missions to unlock new powers. But now you ignore the side mission. And instead those side abilities or those abilities unlock after Primus battles, or you can cash these cards in to get a reroll. You're going to save them only for your biggest, most costly flubs because they're expensive. It costs you a full week out of 24 to gain an opportunity card. But I do really appreciate that when it comes down to it, when a bad roll really screws you over, you can mitigate that bad luck. So I guess the natural question is, why have this output luck at all? There is an addictive thrill to rolling those dice, to throwing those bones, and to shouting, "Screw you, RNG gods," as you upgrade your character and increase those dice pip by pip. There is fun to creating cascading fallback plans. But I admit, if none of that sounds fun to you, if you hate dice, then yeah, you're going to at least want to play somebody else's copy, if not avoid the game entirely. So that's basically it for my counterpoints, which I think moves those topics from definitely negative to, maybe negative. But there are a couple of other things. Cost. We all know chip theory games are expensive. What would really kill me is if this $130 game at the time of this recording required the $50 expansion, but that isn't the case. Mercury's Boots rule set to me feels required, but once again, those are downloadable for free. What will people be mixed on? Complex rules interactions. So given all of the keywords, you can make an easy comparison to Marvel Champions. There are a lot of keywords in Marvel Champions, and they're also constantly being introduced with every new season or whatever they're called. But because Marvel Champions has such an intensely devoted fan base with many players literally only playing Marvel Champions, Fantasy Flight continuously revises the rules on, say, the order that things are applied in and the exact meaning of certain words and phrases. And then there are forums that are almost totally dedicated to people putting forth edge case scenarios and then the rules lawyers trying to come to a consensus, which they're usually able to do. Now, I think that these interactions are often where things can get really interesting, but there are far too many of them because of those keywords, because of new arena rules, because new rules are on every single event card. So you're going to have situations that can be resolved in multiple ways, even if you're fully familiar with the rules. There are just things that would actually require new definitive rules creations, and I don't think that chip theory is going to do this. So when you play this game, you have to be okay with making some decisions as you go. Me, I don't care. One of the joys of solo gaming is guilt-free house rules. I feel fine as long as I consistently apply the rules to each side. That's the good thing here, is that the enemy troops are the same ones that you use for your troops. So all you have to do is be consistent and you can feel pretty good, even if you don't have an official ruling. But if ambiguity bothers you, and I know that it truly does for some people, then that is something to weigh. Production value. This is a beautiful game. I don't think many people will be mixed on that, but rather, this might be overproduced for you. I wouldn't want a game like this that isn't one of my favorite games. After watching some playthroughs, I thought that it might end up being so. And so I took the chance and got it, and I'm glad that I did. I even very recently bought that neoprene scorecard that I did not add that to my Pandora's Ruin purchase. Game Nerds was sold out, but I got an alert when they got one in and scrambled to buy it, which is I'm gonna I'm gonna say that I do judge myself for that a little bit. But I also play a lot of games that I print at home, and I'm not talking about getting crafty with it and making them look good. So I don't need this across the board, but I love this game and I love it being like this. But I wouldn't want all my games to be like this. If you end up loving the game, you might want it to be made of indestructible neoprene and plastic. If you just love lavish game productions, then I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you're meh on the game and aren't into all the bling, well, you might be upset that you spent $130 on it instead of 50 or 60 that it would be if it were made out of cardboard. What will people like about Hoplomachus Victorum? Now we're getting to the good stuff. The combat is so much fun, which is good considering this is a combat game. The interaction of the skills, the management of distance, the amount of really significant choices you have. I play a lot of skirmish games. What drives me crazy is when a skirmish game looks nice, but you realize that the gameplay is just like whacking two action figures together. Hoplomachus Victorum does not play itself. Your choices make all the difference. And not just on your turn. Your choices when playing the AI also make a big difference. This is a game that is balanced such that when there are multiple ways to meet the requirements of the enemy AI, they say that you should choose the best for yourself. I like to think of it as you're a god too, like Pluto, manipulating things in the background, just like he is, and your hero is just your avatar. Choose the best for the enemy. Sounds hardcore, but really, the designers can just tune the game more difficult and then have the players choose the best for themselves. Now, there are many games that I really enjoy where you're supposed to play as if you are your own opponent and choose the best move for the enemy when there are multiple possibilities. But one thing that the opposite tact does, as in Hoplomachus Victorum, is that when you are choosing the best move for yourself after fulfilling the enemy requirements, it keeps you fully engaged and strategizing during the enemy turn, almost as if it were your own, because you're setting up your own upcoming actions. Still with the combat, the way the skills interact is complex, but that's good. It gives your brain something to really chew on. It gives you a lot of little puzzles. And yeah, I admit that sometimes I do forget something until I'm too deep to retcon my choices and I realize the enemy is about to mess me up for something I didn't notice. But also, sometimes I do the same in my favor. And I'll realize that I have a skill that I set myself up perfectly for, even though I didn't remember I had it. Character upgrading. I love a game with lots of choices for upgrading your character. I'm not huge on campaign games, but this is the aspect of them that I do enjoy. These heroes each have their own deck of special abilities called prowess cards. Along with those, you also have the ability to increase stats and dice. After most fights, the upgrade is quick, because it's just a stat or die or recruiting a soldier, which is also very strategically fun. After a Primus fight, of which you'll have up to 7 under the Mercury's Boots rule set, it'll take you longer because you get to fully heal your hero and then choose 3 upgrades with some really significant choices to make. This isn't on the level of Primal the Awakening, Monster Hunter, or Adventure Tactics, but neither is it obvious and on rails. The choice of prowesses and opportunity card upgrades makes a huge difference in how upcoming battles will play out. And those are going to be completely different from campaign to campaign as you play different heroes and draw different opportunity cards from the large deck. Small scale skirmishes strung together into a larger scale campaign. This smooths out the wrinkles of luck, which is great, but also it lets you eat your cake and have it too. This is a long, satisfying game of deep character growth. It's also something you can play when you have a half hour and you can still have a satisfying full experience, with the caveat being if you have a table that you can leave it set up on. I really wish more campaign games would take this approach. Chip Theory could have kept the giant arenas that you find in Hoplomachus Remastered. Instead, they shrunk the arenas, shrunk the number of combatants in any given battle, and gave you these bite-sized but very satisfying enclosed increments of game. I love Primal the Awakening and Dungeon Universalis. In fact, the leveling up in Dungeon Universalis reminds me a lot of the leveling up here. But sometimes I don't have 2 hours to play an increment of one of those campaigns. And whether or not I have that much time, once I set those games up, they're on my table, preventing me from taking advantage of a free half hour. You don't have that trouble with Hoplomachus Victorum. While it's out and set up, it is both a filler game and a deeply satisfying overarching experience. Production value. If cache and game weight aren't an issue, it's pretty objectively, or at least intersubjectively, a fantastic production. The neoprene arenas on top of the larger campaign neoprene mat is just delightful. The eternal and attractive plastic cards, the wonderfully heavy chips, the art. This is one of my all-time favorite game boxes, no question. It's just so epic. The stadium seating for the unrecruited troops? Are you kidding me? This is 17 pounds of delight for the board gamer's senses. Variety. I'm ending with this benefit because you know that for me, this is supreme. I want to feel like I can get hundreds of plays out of any given game, though I will typically come nowhere near that many. Every fight here feels different because there are so many different factors coming into play in a significant way. Your hero makes a big difference, and you have 8 of them. But how you develop that hero also makes a difference. What prowess cards do you take early on? Which do you leave entirely behind? What opportunity cards are you lucky enough to draw, giving you access to a bunch of other prowess cards and tactics chips? The type of match that you fight also makes a huge difference. Bloodshed, where you have to try to keep all your troops alive, because if they die, they're gone into the enemy bag, is one thing. Then there's sporting events, where your troops are just knocked out, and where you have other goals than slaying the entire other team. You've got King of the Hill, Capture the Flag, and Skirmish. The 8 arenas make a huge difference. Each arena comes with its own rule set. The Parthian arena features chariots. The Lemosian arena is tiered, rising in the center, and whoever has the high ground has the advantage, rolling extra dice to hit with. The Amazonian arena has swinging pillars that push you hither and yon while you're trying to fight. And each of these significantly impacts those different game types listed before. Just for example, King of the Hill is a much different experience in the Plutonian arena, where there are wild beasts that start atop the 2 hills that you need to hold. Then you have 35 sport event cards and 35 bloodshed event cards. Each card has a different enemy lineup. A mix of local units to get a benefit in the arena and units that you've been dropping into the draw bag. Each card has a rule or two that change how the match is played. In this video, I got an event card where the defenders attack with an extra black die, and black dice hit on 5 out of 6 sides. I had been playing with a lot of defenders to keep my hero and archer at range, so this made a huge difference. Sometimes the cards can really disadvantage you though. So this is when you spectate and are able to heal up and also discard that event and put the next 3 event cards back in any order you choose. Or do you think that you have enough health to that maybe you should push through even though you don't have an advantage in that fight? These cards can make a fight feel very different from the one that came before it, even if they're the same type in the same arena. That's a lot of shifting modules to slap together and see how they interact. 20 plays would be a good amount to get out of a lot of games, but you'll likely have 20 little combats in the 10 to 12 hours of just one campaign. And only then am I feeling like maybe putting it back on the shelf to play something else. Throughout that campaign, it feels varied and exciting, with new puzzle pieces being removed and added at every turn, some of which you have control over and others of which you don't. An example of how just one little change can make a big difference. In this campaign, I got a tactic chip I'd never seen before, spiked armor. You put it on a soldier, and if they die or get knocked out, they deal 3 points of damage to any enemy of your choice. 3 points of damage is huge. This thing made the playthrough a completely different experience for me after getting it. I went into sporting matches where death is impermanent and led the charge with my human bomb. I'd sadly use it in bloodshed matches too, slapping it on a low HP character likely to die from just one hit. Those poor tacticians with their 2 hit points and only close range attacks, I didn't want them to die, but if they were going to anyway, that's one chip. And it gave me not only variety, but stories. So anyway, I gotta stop. I could keep going, but yeah, this recording is getting long. Suffice to say, that's a lot of variety inside the campaign, and then you flavor the entire thing with a different hero and with a different scion, each requiring new strategies. So while the game is currently priced at $130, because of how it's designed, it offers so much more value than your average base game, to the point where I think that it justifies its price. The Pandora's Ruin expansion. Once you realize the gameplay value that each of those small components bring, the value proposition of Pandora's Ruin becomes more obvious. This expansion is made up of 5 modules, and you can choose which to add. Strange Sands. This module gives you 2 sets of rules for each arena. This is huge. It has a lot of variety and a lot of fun. Dark Days. These extra event and opportunity cards are supposed to flavor the campaign with the scion that you choose. This was to increase the presence of the scion in the world. It's like this huge world-threatening behemoth, but it ends up feeling a bit hollow throughout most of the game. If you are able to read the scion card and understand it, you can strategize like your hero and team build towards it, but I'm bad at understanding things just from reading. So for me, the scion made almost no impact on the campaign before, until the actual scion battle. Now you get these special events and rewards that impact the campaign in ways other than just that strategic building towards the final enemy. I will say that the extra events and opportunity cards with their new prowesses and tactic ships are like a really big value, but it's it can be frustrating because they can be inaccessible. When you choose your ultimate enemy scion for the campaign, you add 3 specific cards to each 35 card deck. But the event decks then are so diluted that you can play a game and barely see any of these. I reduced each deck by 5 down to 30 and then took them back up to 33 with the new Scion cards, because you're not going to make it through those whole entire decks anyway. And if you were to somehow, you could just pull it from the ones you set aside. But honestly, I still don't think that that was enough. Next time I'm either going to remove 10 cards from every deck, or come up with some system for pulling Scion specific cards at an interval or with a roll of the dice. With 12 Scions, each capping off a 12-hour campaign, it'll be years before I make it back to any given Scion and get to use those specific cards again. I want to see those cards. There's a big stack of new Scion-specific tactics chips and prowess cards, and I didn't get to see any in this campaign, and that's not right. But if the balance is done right, this is a lot of new stuff to see for a lot of spiced up, 10-hour-long campaigns. The Rivals. The premises are the unused heroes sitting in the capital of their nations, waiting for you to come challenge them. And those fights are very fierce because of how tough those units are. But the rules give a lineup for each of those fights as the campaign progresses, but there's none of those wacky extra rules that are so fun from the regular event cards. And so, while the soldier is the premise is interesting, then the lack of special rules is kind of boring. Well, now you get a deck of 15 Primus event cards. These are tuned specifically with the knowledge that you're facing a big baddie, and they're a lot of fun. So this time, when you face Kraken Lance, it won't be the same fight that you had against him in every other campaign. Faces of Evil. 4 more Scions. That's 4 more campaigns without repeats. Enough said. The Mercury's Boot rule set. The other 4 modules are wonderful, but they aren't necessary to get right off the bat. You can confidently wait and see if you like the game and not feel like you're missing out on the true Hoplomachus Victorum experience like you will hear about some other games with essential expansions. Except for the Mercury's Boots sped up rule set. It really improves the game. The biggest change for me is that it makes sporting events much more worthwhile by increasing the bonus and reducing the penalty. But the good news is that you can download those rules, as I'm saying for the 3rd time. I was playing by them long before my copy of Pandora's Ruin arrived on my doorstep. Conclusion. Is that enough to describe my favorite game? Well, it has to be, because 90% of people have already navigated away at this point. Hoplomachus Victorum is absolutely one of my all-time favorite games. Maybe my number 1 favorite game of all time, honestly. It's a culmination of a bunch of design choices that maximize the rewards of different mechanisms while minimizing the drawbacks to an incredible degree. If I've piqued your curiosity and you'd like to see how a rather forgetful person handles all the emergent interactions, especially in the later game, which is when this gameplay takes place, so it's a little bit different than most of the other videos that show you the first handful of fights. There's lots of abilities going on in my playthrough video. Check it out. I go through 3 events, and they were a lot of fun and a good mix of different things to show you. Anyway, that's it from me. Finally, have a great rest of your day, and keep playing solo.